And welcome to another episode of the Alive and Free podcast, where today we are interviewing somebody new. And we're going to dive into a situation around your health, how that's associated with your body, and what that does to change the state of your system so that not only can you have mental health and well being, not only can you get rid of all that other stuff, but we're talking longevity of life, quality of life as you move into the future with somebody who's really pushing the frontiers. His name is Daniel Rudyak, or Danny, as he has invited me to call him, but he says you all can call him the man. Um,
Dan the man.
Dan the man.
Dan the
so,
man. That's
so
right.
there we go. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, Danny. Welcome on the show.
Thanks for
Um,
having me, Bob.
you have quite an incredible story. What's interesting about your story is that your story is one of being an onlooker. Your story is one of uh, being somebody who's not necessarily the one suffering, but the one that is watching suffering in a sort of helpless manner and feeling like your hands are tied. And that's what spurred you to do the things you're doing. So do you want to walk us back and tell us a little bit about what got you started in this process of, because you weren't in this business before. This totally kind
Correct.
of changed your framework. What got you started into starting to look at how you can help your average person improve their well-being in a really accessible way?
Yeah, so much of what you cover is how you can think about brain health and mental health. And I think that there are a lot of things that you can do preventatively and proactively. My story is one of, I unfortunately, there are certain circumstances you just absolutely can't do anything about. So when I was 12, from a neurocognitive perspective, my father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Mhm.
And so it's effectively an attack of the brain on motor functions, and you don't get rid of it at this point in healthcare and medicine. And soon, I truly hope that with MS and ALS, we'll have advancements in AI that will change that. But you can't do anything about it. So I witnessed my father's motor function decline over time and his experience with the healthcare system. And soon thereafter, getting diagnosed with lung cancer and being told that if they operated on him, he'll survive. They operated on him 5 years later, nothing. Half a year later, metastatic, you're going to die. Soon thereafter, wow, I don't understand how this happened. You have a new lease on life. You're fine. You're okay. It's not your the cancer. It stopped, and then 2 months after that, his passing. So that was my, to your point, as an onlooker, first experience in my early adult life and teenage years with the United States healthcare system as I know it, and kind of just broadly health and neurocognitive
What
disease and cancer.
what were the questions that were going through your mind as you saw, especially with such a quick turnaround? Yeah, the cancer's gone, and then 2 months later, it's back. What in your head was it just total confusion, or did you even blame the healthcare system at the time? Was it just what was going on there?
So first and foremost, I always say that I have two elements to my story as an onlooker and two people who've influenced my life. In no way do I want to discredit the hardworking doctors in the United States and kind of the way that they go about it, because I still believe that we had incredible doctors, but it's just the state of how we diagnose, how we prescribe, how we think about things. It must evolve. And so as an kind of emotionally, first of all, from the MS perspective, you feel tremendously helpless, right? So um, there's just nothing you can do, and you want to motivate people to, like my father, I would want to motivate him to walk and do as much as he can. And sometimes that wasn't great, right? That pushed him. When it was hot outside, he would flare up and he would just be done for the day. And then when that happened, 2 or 3 days go by and he's just immobile, right? So you want to be helping them, you want to motivate them and be a part of kind of the change, but sometimes that doesn't work the way that you expect, and you feel very, very helpless.
Yeah.
On the cancer side, um, it was just interesting to hear like these hard and fast numbers, right? Hey, in 5 years, if it doesn't come back, he's cancer free. 5 years later, he's cancer free. 6 months after that, metastatic. So I think a lot of that is framing, and maybe we're taught in medical school perhaps to like frame things in a certain way, which might be wrong, and deal in absolutes. So it was a lot. I went through chemo with him, and He was fortunate enough to get on a trial therapy. And that trial therapy is why I think they ultimately said, hey, you're you've there's a miracle here. You're cancer free and it's not growing rather, and you've got a new lease on life. I know we told you 6 months ago, like it's a matter of months. This is kind of the circumstance. Now, at that moment, you prepared for 6 months to part ways with someone that, my father was critical in my life, was the only person really there for me.
Mhm.
You're ready to part ways, and then it's just this overjoyous moment. And I don't know, you feel 2 months later losing him clearly to the chemo because you're poisoning your body. You feel let down, frustrated, angry, lost. These are the emotions that,
Yeah.
at least in my experience, I was going through, and candidly alone. Right? Is There's something about losing your parents.
Mhm.
Right? There's always this moment for any person who's fortunate enough to have parents, where you kind of almost feel like if you're fortunate, they're the ones that will always be there for you. They're that safety net. You can always go to them with a question or sleep on their couch, whatever it is. And then once that's gone, it's very transformative.
Mhm.
Um, so that
Yeah,
was
I
that was my
remember. I
yeah.
remember.
Go
Like,
ahead.
so my dad's had cancer twice, and the first time, we it was just it was melanoma. It started in his foot, spread to the lymph nodes. They used some chemo without the radiation part, and he was managed to be cleared. And then 2 years ago, it came back with a vengeance, and it was everywhere.
Yeah.
And he got down to like 120 pounds or something. His personality was gone. Basically, he was like a raw wire, just sitting there where I would carry him from place to place. And the doctors were really convinced about all of the immunotherapy. And fortunately, I mean, we pushed them to use the same thing that worked the last time. Um, but I remember having to sit there and, like at home, processing before I went up to spend as much time as I could with him. Like, okay, this might be it. This might be my dad's gone, and all the medical intervention didn't help. All of the other stuff didn't help.
Exactly.
It's like no evidence of disease, which is, I think, at least honest. We don't see any evidence of disease. It's not saying you're
Right.
cured, but to have it come back and to have it come back that fast and that vicious. Fortunately, he's alive. He wears a T-shirt that says, "I can't believe I'm still alive either." Actually,
I love that.
so I haven't. We didn't lose him, but I know that feeling of we were
Do
waiting.
you think
We
mentally
got
it was more
weeks.
difficult for? What is your perspective? Do you think mentally it was more difficult for him personally, um, and or seeing kind of how you guys were taking it, um, like dealing with it, dealing with the cancer, dealing with it? Do you think that was the challenge for him, or dealing with how his loved ones were impacted?
When I've talked to him about it, he was he felt abandoned by God for a bit, and he was struggling with this. Like, we've prayed, we've done all these things, so he was struggling in a faith way, and then it was somewhere in the middle of it where he began to see that his family was showing up, that made him recognize that maybe God was working through his family to comfort him. And so then he didn't want his family. He didn't want any of us to suffer. He's a fighter pilot, so I think him seeing us suffer was probably harder than, especially my mom. Watching her response and seeing how much she was just like essentially killing herself to try and keep him alive. I think that was really rough on him, but he just didn't have the energy to do much. Once things started getting better, his relationship with us has changed massively. And I think that it's that family relationship and seeing how that works. A lot of people are ready to suffer themselves. They might not like it, but when they would rather do that than watch their loved ones suffer. And I think he fits in that camp really well.
Yeah.
And the way I saw my family do it, my sisters and everybody else, and the amount of suffering that's with them, they didn't go through the kind of training that I've been through, where I'm dealing with like really looking at what's real and where my emotions are and how to like process them in a way that doesn't make them control my life. But I watch them, just completely fall apart at times because of uncertainty. Do we know what's going on? Do we not know what's going on? All of that stuff. So very, very familiar with that.
So, do you have siblings?
Two sisters, yeah.
Two sisters. Are you the middle child?
Yes, I am.
Amazing. Same. Two
Okay.
sisters, middle child.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so this was the first one. You were in your teens, and then we move, and you're how old now?
Uh, About to be 35.
Okay, and because this most recent one, the big recent one was with your current fiance, and that's like just this past year or two, that you're dealing
So
with.
yeah, it was 4 years ago,
Okay.
and um, my career was in finance. So I worked in investment banking and private equity, which essentially means I worked with businesses of all sizes to help them understand their capital needs, how they can grow. And it was a lot of strategic thinking, and I thought that was really exciting. Many of the businesses I touched were healthcare related, but that was my career, and I genuinely didn't think I was ever going to do anything different. 4 years ago, my fiance started feeling really unwell. She went to a major hospital in Los Angeles. They told her that she has a viral infection and she was safe to go home. And 2 days later, pale in her face, she couldn't maintain any fluids. And we were getting very scared and concerned that we might have perhaps gotten improper feedback.
Hmm.
And so we went to another hospital that is another major hospital in our area. And after waiting in the ER, they came to the same conclusion, which was that she had a viral infection and to go home. She inspires me all the time, and I'm so fortunate to have her in my life. But she's a strong advocate of herself, and many people aren't. And so she said, "I'm not leaving here without a scan. I need to know more. This doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right." So after a lot of
Which,
argument,
for the record, that type of response is rare. Even if people want to say
rare.
it, it's because of just the way that the system's set up, not by any one person's maliciousness, but you have an authority figure. Most people don't feel that's a rare level of courage to step up and be like, nope, no, we're going to look at this different.
And Bob, furthermore, it wasn't that they said, "Yes, ma'am, that sounds like a plan." She had to fight with them,
Okay.
right? So, well, I don't know that this is appropriate. I'm telling you that you're fine. If you don't have the courage, which I probably would not have, to have asked and gone there,
Multiple times. Yeah.
you likely don't have the courage to do it multiple times, as she did, and she did. And they came back to us and said, "Ma'am, you are septic. It's clear that your appendix had ruptured several days prior. You have E. coli growing. And as a binary mortality matter, we have to operate on you immediately. We're going to flush you with essentially meds that kill everything positive and negative in your body, because we can't even see the inside of your stomach, and then we have to go into emergency surgery immediately."
Mm.
And that was, once again, for me, I can only imagine. She handled it with a straight face and said, "Let's do whatever we have to do." And I was very emotional, because I, for the first time, felt like this is happening all over again, and
Yeah.
I'm going to live like the. I was thinking I'm going to lose like the only person in my life that was there for me, and that I trusted and loved. So yeah, it was a very emotional time. We go in there, we have the surgery, um, stay in there for 2.5 weeks, and these same it, the recovery was very long thereafter. When they kill all the positive microbiomes in your gut, and it's horrible for you. So it was a very long recovery, but the same folks who told us, "Go home, you're fine," and once again, lots of respect for them. It's just how they were taught. Sent us a letter in the mail, which had a gross billing of over $500,000. And I was just thinking, like, if I wasn't already pissed off,
Yeah.
this definitely, like, you, it's over the edge.
Was there
And
was there any, like, the people that were offering the initial opinion that, like, oh, it's just a viral infection, go home? Was there any sense of them coming back to own their their mistakes? And if there wasn't, do you think that that was a personal like embarrassment, or do you think that there's some kind of legal repercussions where they didn't want to admit wrongdoing that they're
Had we
controlled
wanted
by?
to pursue medical malpractice
Okay.
because they were attempting to discharge her,
Hmm.
there was likely a large case. With that said, I don't believe the response was necessarily a function of that so much as it was a rush to the immediacy of action required.
Hmm.
And let's just we need to attack the situation very quickly because you don't have that much time.
Yeah.
So I wasn't expecting to, and I don't think it would have changed anything. These folks deal with stuff all the time. It's a great example, and this is ER, by the way. Then you get admitted, you're not in ER anymore. You get
Yeah.
completely new people. But truly, you know, politics, whatever aside, The Pit does a pretty good job, as I'm told, as a TV show, emulating what it's like to be in an ER circumstance. So
Yeah.
they deal with things all the time. There was probably a gun wound victim right next to us somewhere. So it's a fast paced environment, but obviously for us, it felt very personal. Um,
Do
and
you, here's a
go ahead.
question. Why do you think the bill was so high?
Oh, easy.
Because this speaks to some of the stuff that you're working on anyway, right? So why do you
Correct.
think the bill
Yeah.
was so high?
I think that the financial model for the US healthcare system um, could use some reform, politely. Um, Insurance is built to support incidents of critical failure in concept and theory, not for preventative and proactive health to try to minimize those likelihoods from happening in the first place, or do every effort you possibly can in order to minimize it. It's just not how the financial model was created. For the hospital systems, they have this complicated concept of they have to bill the most they possibly can to the insurance because they're hoping they're going to get the most reimbursement. Now, of course, that trickles down to the consumer. What I've been told many, many times is that if you don't have um, insurance, your bill would look like, you know, 5% of the bill that they send to insurance. So it's just kind of how they work. Now,
Huh.
unfortunately, what that means is the insured individual, when you start thinking about out of pocket maxes, et cetera, and we got to teens of thousands of dollars, ends up paying a lot more than the uninsured. So it's crazy. But it's, look, it was like, $100 for Jello, this unnecessary little check with 1990s medical device, $1,000 here, right? Like it was kind of, that's how the game is played. Um, and the way that I think we interact and hospitals interact with insurance is certainly due for some reimagination. The way that we interact with hospitals, and by the way, what we're working on will never change ER or acute or urgent care. That need will forever exist. It just helps redefine, the we are hoping to help redefine the outcomes, right? So that we can minimize the likelihood that you need to get in there in the first place, at least at a
Yeah.
certain age.
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of the moment where in my head, you know, that mental break where I was like, I need to do something more impactful in my life. And I was probably changing one high pressure stress job from a mental health perspective. I know how deeply you focus on that to
Hmm.
one that was even 10 times greater.
Yeah. Yeah. Being a
Starting
CEO of
business
your own
is not
company. Yeah. Yeah. That's like four times the work, and now you own a job, not a business. Yeah. Got it.
correct. And you're on a mission. And so when you're not executing on that mission, you're not only failing your employees and your team, but the people's lives that you're hoping to change. So it's a heavy burden, definitely way more rewarding, way more exciting. But
Mhm.
I definitely felt the calling at that point to switch and do something that mattered most to me.
Yeah, that's great. So you start switching, and obviously you're seeing the gaps in not just the billing and the diagnosis and stuff. Um, Maybe talk a little bit about that, because some of the stuff you're working on has to do with getting better diagnoses or a better understanding of what's going on personally with a person. And
Right.
for the people that are listening, just so you don't know, he started his own company. He mentioned that, and he's working on some sort of like combination of tech and personalization and care to put
Precisely.
into the palm of your own hand, so that you can advocate for yourself, like his fiance did, but in a much more informed way rather than just
Precisely.
having to go on your gut. So, how are you working on the diagnosis thing? Maybe talk about how
Well,
diagnosis is now, and then moving that way.
so I'll say that, once again, we aren't trying to overcome the acute needs as they arise. Um, Certainly, what we're trying to build and what we are working towards building and executing on would allow for more informed decision making at the hospital level as well, because right now your information is very fragmented, right? So your doctor doesn't know if your other doctor has prescribed CVS pharmaceuticals and what your labs were and what potential, back pain you experienced from 10 doctors ago, and what a functional medicine or what a supplementation stack looks like for you. So there's no communication across these, what they're referred to as electronic medical record systems. Um, and then furthermore, there's a lack of interpretation of that information done in a big data kind of way. But I think what's important is to take a step back and say, um, at that moment in time for my fiance, I realized I really cared about figuring out the solution before it got there, right? And it won't
Mm-hmm.
happen all the time, but maybe you can have a better outcome for a lot of folks. And what that meant for me was preventative and proactive health. And I have two co-founders who have their own very personal and moving, and inspired me deeply stories of health. Um, One as a participant and one as an onlooker.
Mm.
And so we went on this journey together to discover what longevity, healthy aging, what did that mean? Um, and as you would imagine, the first place we went is supplements. And it was very clear for us. We were able to understand that as we get older, our organs start to not function at the same pace. Our brain does not, it's not as acute and sharp as it once was. Your natural vitamin and mineral and coenzyme production declines. It's just a function of aging. And I think what you do is probably 80% of the battle, what you advocate for, Bob, which is,
Mm-hmm.
what we'll talk about is sleep and all the healthy habits and things that you can do
Yeah.
to better your life. But there is this kind of, that doesn't change the fact that you have a depletion of production of core minerals, vitamins, coenzymes. And so when we looked into supplements, we quickly found out that, of course, they're not FDA regulated. But what does that mean? It means the majority of them don't actually have the minerals or vitamins or supplements that they say they do inside. And there was a large study that concluded that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, the type of vitamin mineral supplement that is put in isn't um, overwhelming majority of the time a clinical grade one. And that means that you can't absorb it, right? So you have about a 3 to 30% absorption rate. So you're really paying on a recurring basis a lot of money for not a whole lot of benefit.
What is the
And
absorption rate of a clinical grade one? Just so that there's a sense of what the disparity is.
60 to 80%,
Okay, so at least, well,
triple
if you're only at
generally.
five, yeah, triple to
Yeah,
more
at bare
depending.
minimum triple, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's much, much,
Okay.
much greater. But that's also the modality, right? So as your body metabolizes it, can it break it down? Can it absorb? And with a lot of these orally, it's the molecules are too large. Like, for example, our bodies produce glutathione. It's our body's master antioxidant. It's
Yeah.
very rich in matcha and Eastern and Asian cultures. Um, it's too big of a molecule to absorb orally. So you need other modalities, intranasal, um, subcutaneous injections, liposomal, to actually be able to absorb some of these larger
Okay.
molecules, or NAD plus is an example, another one. So there are also just like the form and function of how you take on these
Okay.
minerals. So that was step one. Okay, so absorption broken, quality of product broken. Where else can we go? And we discovered med spas and IV therapies. And First of all, they were egregiously expensive. There were no doctors there to guide us. It's kind of just like look at a menu. And once we started asking a lot of questions, we came to quickly learn that they're not FDA regulated. And so there's no sterility test, there's no endotoxicity test, there's no potency test. So they're injecting you with these IVs, which generally cost between $500 to $1,200 a session. You need to do them every 4 weeks because they have a short half life, but egregiously expensive, and you don't even know what you're getting. And they're not, compounded in a sterile way. Scary. And there's no doctor, there's no like understanding of what the outcome should look like. That seemed broken to us as well. And there was no data to inform decision making. So that's kind of our journey that started 4 years ago. 3 years ago, we decided to start ReadyRx. And we started it by building the technology that can help understand all of your data, understand who you are as an individual, and help personalize your experience. And a year and a half ago, we actually launched the brand ReadyRx, which is a longevity focused platform. And it's direct to consumer. And essentially, we have monthly subscriptions, which give you access on a preventative and proactive health basis to unlimited doctor chat and communication in your subscription. So the physician layer, of course, then your supplementation, which is all pharmaceutical and clinical grade. So potency tested, sterility tested, endotoxicity, and actually knowing that you're getting a high premium product, all by the way, packaged at more than a 90% discount to what you would get elsewhere. And then what we're launching on the diagnostic side, which is the personalization. And so, we've had tremendous community engagement and we've heard many stories that sound just like ours, and people really want to change, right? They're like, they don't trust supplementation, just like us. They don't trust that that the U.S. healthcare system, as it stands right now, is created in a way and organized and managed in a way that's to their benefit. And they want to take control of their health. And it's happening at younger ages, right? It's not just, 30s, 40s, 50s. You're seeing this even with alcohol consumption as an example, and the Gen Zers. But people are kind of fed up, and as we were. And so we've created a solution which is an accessible, personalized health longevity solution that we're very proud of. We ourselves are customers and patients, and it's been a heck of a journey. But that's kind of as we build this and learn more, we're building healthy habits, right? So I want to reel this back into all the things that you say.
Yeah.
What the supplementation, the understanding it for you, the doctors are very critical components of this, but that's a piece of the equation. The larger piece is what you do with it outside of speaking to a doctor and the supplementation, which is the healthy sleep, the healthy hydration, the food that you take in,
Yeah.
and that all come like that direction, that guidance, those habits all come from us as well, because we don't believe this is just a here, take the supplement. That's not the answer. It's getting your steps in and being physically active. It's mental health and how you respond to things and how you deal with stress, a lot of which goes down when you get sufficient sleep, right? So it's all of these things together. There isn't there's no silver bullet. And I know that people look for it. It just doesn't exist. At this point, maybe there's 10 years down the line, some drop that will do that for us, but certainly not the case as it stands.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple questions. One, you're working to aggregate all this data so that a regular consumer like me could just download the app, whatever the subscription model is. I assume you have various tiers, and then I have information. Is that tied into the information in the medical system at all? If so, that seems like that's a lot of hurdles that you would have to jump through legally and
Yeah,
HIPAA and all the other stuff.
precisely.
Um,
Yeah. So I would say that there have been two tiers and stages of kind of our rollout, right? The
okay.
first rollout was how do we get doctors, personalized meal plans, healthy habits, um, the supplements that are come from trusted, high quality sources in the hands of consumers that already have a sense of kind of what their issues are.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the go to market. And that's how we have tens and tens of thousands of customers. That's how we service them at this time. And what we've been working towards are launching and the hurdles that you've outlined, and launching our labs, which are effectively priced into the subscription or within small increment in cost, which are very robust, analyzing the data that comes from your wearables and or your sleep mattress, what have you.
Yeah.
And then the biggest hurdle, of course, is what we've been working through, which is tapping into, with consent, the legacy electronic medical record system to store all of your data in one place so that people can have a better understanding of themselves in a way that makes sense, that's not confusing, that's not overly clinical. Because the
It's
versions
definitely
of it
difficult.
that kind of exist today can be scary. They don't provide insights and are intended for the viewer that's indoctrinated and really knows what they're reading, not for anyone, not for the 99%.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine there's a lot of hurdles. I think it's really significant that you try to straddle this line of not being antagonistic toward the people working in the healthcare industry, or even the fact that the industry exists, but rather antagonistic toward anything that produces some kind of obstacle to a person having access to the best that they have. I think that's really significant because you can go on these crusades, and people can get really angry, and then often you end up taking an extremely polarized view that sometimes misses the fact that the emergency medicine we have in general is probably the best that's ever existed on the planet. Now, preventative care, probably the worst that's ever existed. Maybe not the worst, but my hunch is it's the worst. I mean, I've studied a lot of these ancient Chinese systems and all these other things, and we have a lot to learn.
it, it's it goes back to like what you do and what you advise on, and healthy thinking, healthy mental stability, habits, etc., and of course the food. But yes, you're right, we have some of the best healthcare in principle, but we also have one of the most unhealthy populations in the world,
Mhm.
right? Both are true.
Yeah.
And something is certainly broken, and it'll take a lot to fix it and put the consumer, the citizens, us, in the driver's seat. And that's what we're trying to enable, right? Because right now it's the insurance is in the driver, the hospitals in the driver's seat, the government is. Okay, but in theory, they're supposed to be serving we the people. And so how do we get we the people to be back in the driver's seat? That's
Yeah.
kind of the big obstacle that we push towards and try to overcome.
Do you find that there's pushback from the medical community only because often we the people are informed by really poor things that have been posted online and all, and sometimes our self-diagnoses are not helpful either because we can be. I've seen this a lot of times where people are poorly informed about what they're dealing with. They come to me with some kind of thing and they've read all of these really convincing articles, and so they're concerned, and so they come. Do you feel like there's some institutional pushback where they're like, yeah, but these people aren't really educated in what's going on? And how are you navigating that?
Um, the answer is there are different, the level of education and understanding obviously vary quite significantly.
Yeah.
With that said, I think now more than ever, look at our parents' generation. We have access to information at our fingertips. It's the least it's ever cost, the most accessible, and so I think that's a net positive. Now,
Okay.
could you make inferences and perhaps take some of that information and lean that in it as a rule or law as opposed to kind of an a view?
Yeah. A
Yes, I
reference
know that.
point. Yeah. Yeah.
Precisely. The answer is I know people. I personally know people who do that,
Yeah.
and just will believe what they see. I I think this gets to a different issue, which
Hmm.
I look the big issues I really think will change the future of the United States as a country are healthcare and education. I
Hmm.
think that leads more towards the education side,
Okay. That's fair.
because of um, and once again, never anything against the incredible educators in this country, but it's because of perhaps where the focus lies, and the focus should lie more, is my belief. It's an opinion on critical thinking, and okay, let's question the source, and
Mhm.
are there other sources? And I think that once that is the status quo, and thinking like that is the status quo, if it ever becomes that case, then I think that that's how you address that issue. I think from the political side and kind of government healthcare, it's too bureaucratic. So they might say these people
Yeah.
don't get it or what have you, but or they might really just agree. But the problem is to get change to happen, there's so much friction,
Okay.
right? And so these are institutions that are very profitable, doing what they're doing, and reimagining that model hurts the bottom line.
Sure.
And um, look, this is a big undertaking, I think, for anyone who's trying to hope for a better future for healthcare. I think some of this, regardless, is like they won't have a choice because we're bringing down costs so much that
Yeah.
that's how you get the consumer in the driver's seat is by making this, like for example, we don't take insurance. We everything's cash pay. But making cash pay more affordable than insurance, that's how you reimagine
Yeah.
the current dynamics.
So you've been running this for about a year and a half
A
since
year and a
launch.
half.
And I'm obviously you've got thousands of subscribers, tens of thousands of subscribers. You got people that you're working with. Do you get case study material? Have you seen feedback? What are some of the? I mean, obviously, there's going to be a vast swath of people that they just feel comfortable with it. Maybe it's not bells and whistles, and they don't have like this superhero story. But are there some things you've seen where this is going the direction where you're like, okay, there's an instance where this person was informed enough to be able to avoid some of the pitfalls I've seen. Here's another one. Do you want to share a couple of those?
I'll say this: a third ish of our customers who will like pause or stop their relationship with us
Hmm.
come back. And it's
Okay.
because they genuinely they feel a difference in their life.
Mm.
And it's more stark when you kind of start something, stop it, and then you realize, right?
Hmm.
So I will say from a subjective, how are like obviously we know this is a clinical model, clinical protocols, everything's coming from a pharmacy. Much of our solutions are subcutaneous little insulin injection of the supplements. So you're getting the highest grade solutions here, but people actually feel better, mental, sleep, energy, so forth, right? That's what long term supplementation should look like. Now, have we had 20 years of customer
No, no,
data
no.
to support that? Not quite yet. We hope that we can see with labs and the customers can see, and that's the most important. It's like, can you see the
Hmm.
trackable year over year variation in your markers,
Hmm.
um, to not only physically and mentally feel better, but also see on a biological level your chemistry changing.
Yeah, that's great. And you're seeing that to some extent with this. You're seeing some markers on that. What? So, you're obviously right now in the midst of like current challenges. If you could snap your fingers and make something just go away, what would that thing be in terms of your the current process
Snap
here?
my fingers.
Yeah.
So is that for like the business? Is that the way people interact with healthcare? Is it
No, no.
like
For in terms of you
biological?
getting success in you getting what it is that you foresee in your particular product out to people, so that they're getting more success. Like what currently is the hurdle that you're like, you know what, this is the next rollout. This is the next thing we're working on, and if I could just snap my fingers with a couple of things, this would be great.
Yeah, I think that having all of the biggest roadblock, because the other things are that we're tremendously excited about are so around the corner that I'm very excited about those. I'd say two things. One is we are big proponents of the acceleration of what HHS is doing with evaluating peptides, which were banned back in 2024 from being compounded in a safe way. So now, um, once again, politics aside, we've enabled a black market that's super risky and unsafe for these products because people actually see and feel the benefits.
Hmm.
So
No
creating a
socialism. Yeah.
safe, yeah, creating exactly creating a safe way for people and an attract and doctor led and monitored way to get access to some of these that are life changing. And I can't. It's not like one or two people. I can't tell you how many people have. The reason why the black market has become so big in 2 years is because it works. Um, so that would be the one snap, and the second snap would be the access to the data, and of course
Yeah.
with consent, but simplifying that, because helping people visualize everything in one place, it will make also, like I said, will never be urgent care
Yeah.
um, or acute care, but it will give those folks more information readily and quickly that they otherwise might not have in a very easy to digest way, as well as for you, it will help personalize your experience and understanding, and maybe we hope will provide warnings when something might go wrong. Right, that would be the evolution of this in
Yeah.
advance of that. So those would be the 1-2 snap.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, because I can imagine even with that happening, um, you would also be able to possibly prevent some serious urgent care visits just because of advanced like you're seeing trends in the person, you can stop the train a lot earlier.
Or to that end, get them in there sooner,
Hmm.
right? Before it might be too
Okay,
late, before
fair.
they're septic or what have you, right? Like
Yeah.
uh so that would be the hope, and that's what we're striving for. um you know I do think that a lot of the burden that we place on ourselves is, once again, the habits that we form. So
Hmm.
mental health plays a tremendous component of this. Sleep, the food we eat,
Yeah.
and I think that people forget about that.
Very much.
I know that they do.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I'm pleased to hear that part of this is okay, cool. Are you getting enough water? Are you taking some steps? Are you sleeping well? Um, there are questions that I would throw in there with people all the time. Like, did you take 5 minutes and just sit and do nothing today so that your life isn't built around productivity? Like things like that that they could. So that's really helpful because ultimately it's a big holistic picture, and too often in specialization we end up it's whack-a-mole and nobody's just taking the person making it better. Yeah.
So the way that we're trying to approach this is through incentive.
Hmm.
And the reason that's the case is breaking habits are really difficult. So the question I have for you is, when you talk to these people, when you work with people like that, what has been the most successful way or regimen or path or protocol or frequency to assist and help people break bad habits?
So I work with, I mean, neurological habits, so instinctive things on top of just like the habit that they come if they have a porn addiction or they drink a lot or they're just chronically depressed or something. Um, the first thing I do is I have to help them see what's really going on, in air quotes, because we're always going to get better understanding of it. But like what's really happening underneath, and that's usually means cutting through their myths about what's happening with them, so that and simplifying it down to at this moment you're having an experience, and these are the things. So from a medical standpoint, you'd be like, here's your heart rate, here's your breathing pattern, here's this, that, and the other. And so when I get them to that and I say, hey, look, oh, you're depressed right now, what does that look like? Oh, your posture's like this. Oh, your breathing is like this. Oh, well, what would happen if we just changed a couple of those things? And they start to realize that they have control over what they thought was this nebulous depression thing or this nebulous anxiety thing, because they're like, oh, wait, hold on, my body, if I change my body, I change my step, and then I don't feel that thing anymore. So that's one arm of it is
Do
helping
you feel
them.
they revert to the mean after they make that change, though? Do they go back to what they've done for 25, 35, 45 years?
They only do that if they don't see clearly what, like, let's look at it this way. For those of you, I'm sorry for those of you listening who still believe in Santa Claus. But there was a moment where you stopped. And that moment was a moment of perception of reality. You had five senses involved. There was a moment of perception. And in that moment, what you thought was true, it's clear that it wasn't. So at this point, however many decades down the road it is, you're not a person who's in danger of waking up tomorrow morning and be like, you know what, Christmas is coming. I should probably write Santa a letter. We got to get the cookies ready. You might be doing that for traditional reasons and all kinds of other stuff. But the belief and all the behaviors around Christmas disappear the minute that perception of reality shifts. So that's what I facilitate with them. The first So once they see, oh my gosh, my emotion is legitimately my body state and that's it. And the thoughts came after that. Well, I can change that. That doesn't mean their body doesn't have a habit. So they do have to go and it takes some, there's a stretch of willpower where they have to like retrain that response. But they don't go back. All the people that have come to retreats and stuff, we call them. We've followed up with thousands of them, and they're like, I don't, I still have moments where I struggle, but like I know I'm not a victim to it. I can get out of it. So it's that perception, and that's ultimately the shift. And I facilitate that bodily. Obviously, there's other ways to do it, but I find the five senses to be exceptionally convincing. So
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Cool. So as we wrap up, is there anything I should have asked you or that you would have loved for me to ask you that I didn't ask that you really want to share?
how do customers interact with, find, or engage with ReadyRx? And the
Ah,
answer is readyrx.com, ReadyRx.com. That
okay.
simple.
Yes. Go check it out. I'm sure you have probably have some customer service or somebody that if they have questions, they can send in a chat or something like that.
100% all the time, 7 days a week. So, yeah, there's a little bubble at the very bottom right. You can ask whatever questions you want. There's a number as well. Our team is always here to support and answer any questions that you guys have.
Ask about Danny's black belt in Taekwondo. Um,
I feel like there's a deep urge to go back. I got it when I was 13, and I haven't really done anything since I was 14 or so. But what is it that you practice, Bob?
I've done a lot of things. I ran a kung fu school for 10 years, but most of what I do
So
right
cool.
now is Russian Sistema because I find it to be the most directly applicable to mental and emotional states. You deal with fear straight on, and it's something that you can practice for long periods of time. And for me, self defense is a byproduct. For me, it's about healthy living, and the primary directive inside of Russian Sistema is non-destructive, which includes how do you move, how do you sit, how do you breathe, are you destroying yourself with that? And so it's a retraining of the whole thing. I find it to be the most. It's not like a MMA or something that you get a belt in, but I find it
All
the
right.
most at this point in time the most healthy and the most enjoyable. So
I'm going to look that up.
Russian,
That's awesome.
yeah, RussianMartialArt.com. You'll find Vladimir, my teacher, and my godfather.
Amazing.
He's there, and he's incredible. He's really, really, really remarkable. Okay,
Amazing.
guys. So all of you listening, this is Danny Rudjak, one of the founders of Ready RX. Go check it out if it's at all interesting, especially if you've had health issues. These are all related to some of the emotional stuff that you're dealing with. Bad habits, even they're related to that because the state of your body really affects the state of your mind, the state of your emotional, and as a result, your capacity to even be in touch with the sort of spiritual side of life where God and you are able to connect. And so this is one tool in the tool belt, and I'm kind of excited about what he's doing to empower your average person and put it into your hands without being antagonistic toward the other people that are in these industries that are also giving their best. So it was great. It was a great chat. Thanks for having it. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
It was great.